The second Final Four game features the other two number one seeds, Duke out of the East region, Houston out of the Midwest. Um, Duke really kind of like it felt like that game was never really in doubt for them against Bama. They jumped out quick, 15-5, kind of maintained that lead throughout. I know Bama got it to 6 or 7 once or twice, but it really never felt like Duke was going to lose that game. It didn't really matter. And honestly, like Flag didn't even play like a great game. I think he was like 6 for 16. Got kind of like forced off his spots quite a bit. I thought. Didn't get a ton of like easy looks. Then as for Houston, that game was never a game. Wire to wire victory against Tennessee. Jumped out quick 4-0, and then I think it was like 13-4, and never really turned back. 36-15 at one point. It really was never much of a game. But now they both come into this game. Both teams that like to play a slower pace. Very different like styles, but Duke comes in -4.5 here, and Torvik, as we were talking about before we started this, Torvik absolutely loves Houston. They actually project Houston -0.7 in this game, so they actually think Duke should be the underdog, which is quite interesting. Obviously, like, when was the last? Has Duke been an underdog in a game all year? Probably
I think
not,
they were a
right?
dog at Arizona, like early in the year, like
Were they? Yeah.
like after they were coming off that loss to Kentucky. They
Yeah.
actually, I think they closed as a dog. I think they're like +1.5.
Yeah. But either way, like that would be uncharted territory for them. But um, you know, should be a fun game, and really some interesting like analytical things to look at that could make for an interesting game if Houston's really able to like muck this game up.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I was kind of just looking through Duke's schedule, and I know they're 16th nationally in turnover rate on the offensive end. Just like, I don't really know what defense that they've played that can actually like get up in your grill and actually bother you. Like, there's not really that many in the ACC. I think you'd say, I mean, Florida State. Florida State will get after you a little bit. They had 5.6% turnover rate. Like, that's just an elite number. Um, There's a couple other ones on here. George Mason kind of gets after you a little bit too. They actually really struggle with that team. They only put up 68 points. That's one of the best defenses in the country, but they haven't really played any defenses that will really get after you. And like, obviously, they haven't played a defense of this caliber. Like, you won't play a defense of this caliber until you actually play Houston. This is the best defense in the country for my money. But I think Duke is fairly well set up outside of the turnovers and outside of like feeling sort of uncomfortable. Like, that would be my one concern is they don't really have a true point guard on this roster, but they do have a lot of guys that are capable of like manning the point guard duties. Like Cooper Flag, he's a point forward, obviously, and he showed some vulnerability, like throwing the ball away a little bit late against Alabama. Like they threw a couple double teams at him. He kind of just threw the ball into the middle of the floor, and he jumps a little bit too often before actually making a decision. And like in a situation like this, like he's going to draw two guys onto him. It's just whether can he make the right read, and is he like, just don't try to make like a perfect pass or trying to thread the needle against his Houston defense. Just, it's not going to work. So making the right reads is going to be really important in this game. I trust these guys for the most part. Like Proctor, he's handled the point guard duties at Duke before. He wasn't obviously fantastic, but he's not like a turnover machine by any means. And yeah, I think there's plenty of guys that are able to handle the pressure. So I think they'll be okay there. Houston's going to force their share of turnovers. They'll do it against everyone. So, but it's just how many do they force is the real question. And if Duke's not turning the ball over, I think they're set up pretty well. They do everything on the offensive end well. Besides that, they shoot the ball at an incredibly high level. They're 57th in 3-point attempt rate, 7th in percentage in the entire country. And, guys like Proctor and Knipple are going to have open opportunities from the corner, from the wing with Houston's rim denial defense. Like, they'll get forced into rotation a bunch, especially if Duke's not giving the ball away. So if they're able to knock down shots at the same clip that they were able to knock them down at throughout the course of this tournament, Duke could potentially run away with this game. I don't like saying that about a Houston team, but it's just, can Houston's offense really keep up in this game? They've shown that like their offense has some, it has some holes, it has some vulnerabilities against like higher caliber defenses, and Duke, they're going to force Houston to create off the dribble, and they can do that to an extent with Uzan and LJ Cryer. I don't really trust Sharp a ton when creating his own offense, especially inside the arc. So it's going to be up to Cryer and Uzan creating in the mid-range, scoring a lot in like the dribble handoff and pick and roll games. They're pretty comfortable scoring in those areas. And against the Duke drop coverage while Maliwatch is on the floor and while Gungba's on the floor, I think that's going to be their opportunity, because they're not going to have a ton of catch and shoot opportunities against a Duke defense that like this version of Duke's defense with less Malik Brown. So and Houston getting on the offensive glass isn't necessarily like a great avenue in this game, because Duke is so big up front and they're pretty good on the defensive glass overall. Obviously, it's tough to keep Houston off the glass for all 40 minutes, as they kind of dominated Tennessee in that area earlier today. So I just think there's less opportunity for Houston's offense than there has been throughout this entire tournament, and they've shown that they're vulnerable. And so if Duke's making enough shots on the offensive end and they're taking care of the ball well enough, I think they could potentially run away with this. As much as I think Houston is like blowout proof, they're just so good on the defensive end, and they keep the possession count low. I think Duke is in a pretty damn good spot here, and I expect them to keep rolling, and I think they're the best team in the country with a little bit of a gap. So I'm going to take them here, and I think they're going to be the title winner.
Yeah. To me, like, this game, my initial thought anyway, is like this game is really unlike any game that Duke has played yet. And that's just because this is a physicality that they haven't even remotely played really maybe all year. I mean, Auburn, I guess maybe a little bit, but that was a long time ago. But this Houston team obviously is just a different type of physical. They're going to be in you. And so I do think that Houston is going to have some success in turning them over, even though Duke has shown the ability to take care of the ball. I also think that, like, as good as Duke is on the defensive glass, I really don't know if there's any stopping Houston from being on the offensive glass. Like, they just use angles. It seems like they track the ball so well. They get, even when they can't grab the rebound themselves, they just get a hand on it. They get so many tap outs to the 3-point line. I think those are really their two areas where they could see some success. If they're able to turn Duke over and get some buckets in transition potentially, even though they don't really love to run, but they'll take their opportunities that are there if they can force turnovers in the midcourt and go get layups, of course. I don't really think that Houston's going to have a ton of success in the offensive end playing through, like Juwan Roberts, like going for the left hook over Maliwak or Flag. Or
he's probably going to get Maliwak, honestly.
Yeah, like that's gonna be a tough matchup for him. Like, the length, the size, even though like he is more physical, like it's gonna be hard to shoot over that because he is only 6'8". And then obviously, like, they're not playing through Francis a ton. Like, a couple times today they did, but that's not super frequent. And Tugler, they're never playing through. So they're gonna really have to rely on like Sharp to make those 32 footers he likes to take. And then Cryer, who didn't shoot it well this weekend at all. I think he was 6 for 17 again today. The other day he was 3 for 14 or something. He struggled this weekend, so I would expect a bit of a better effort from him. And Uzan, he was pretty solid all weekend. So it's really just the other end. I think that Duke, even though Houston is the best defensive team in the country, I just think Duke has too many avenues to score, too many weapons. They obviously have Flag, but then, Proctor's been playing like out of this world, like maybe like a third team All-American type player this tournament. Like he's been ridiculous. And then Knippel's been great, of course. Sion James does all the little stuff. I mean, he's just so physical. He can probably take, Uzan or Cryer or whoever he draws off the bounce. And obviously, like Houston's rim protection defense is great, but they're going to have to give something up. And Duke, like you said, seventh in the country in 3-point percentage. If they're going to deny the rim so much, they're going to rotate. They're going to get open threes. So really, I think that like the avenue for Houston is if Duke just for some reason has a cold shooting night, they turn the ball over a bunch. And then on the other end, Houston's able to knock down some shots. So I'm also going to side with Duke. I do kind of expect this game to be closer though, because I really do believe in like Houston just not being blowout material. Like I think they keep it maybe within the number, honestly. Like I think that they just play so hard. I think Sampson's a great coach that really hasn't gotten enough credit over the years. So I'm going to take Duke to win this game. I'm going to take Houston to stay within the 4.5 number.
Yeah, I mean, just for some reason, this game kind of reminds me of when Houston went to the Final Four in 2021, and then they got blown out by Baylor. Just like Baylor just had too many offensive weapons on the perimeter, and they just knocked down a million shots. I think Baylor won that game by like 25 or 30, if I remember right. I mean, that team was incredible. But yeah. If Houston can, assert their like physical dominance and like really bother Duke with their pressure in the first half, like they're going to have to build like some sort of a cushion, I think, in the first half, like go into halftime with a 8 or 9 point lead to like feel really, really good. Because I think once Duke starts kind of solving this defense, I think they're going to end up having success. I just think they have too much shooting. And one thing to monitor is potentially Cooper Flag as a role man in this game. Houston, obviously, they like the hard hedge all ball screens. So using like Proctor or Knippel as like the role handler, and then they kind of hard hedge that, and they can get the ball to Flag as a role man, and then you're playing 4-on-3 with Flag. I don't think they're going to get that many opportunities there because Sampson's obviously a lot smarter than that, but he can get a few opportunities there, and he's able to make a play when they're playing 4-on-3 off of that hard hedge. So that's definitely something to monitor because he's so versatile that you can put him in a lot of different spots. Like you can use him as the handler as well, and hopefully we can trust him to make the right read once he's in the air, which, like I said, it was an issue last game against Alabama a little bit. But yeah, overall, I just think Duke is too offensively well-rounded for Houston's defense to be forced into rotation so often. And I don't think Houston has enough offensive firepower. And like that was a really good point about Roberts in the post-up game. He's not really going to be able to get to that left hook. He's most likely going to be guarded by Maliwatch in this game. And you can throw Flag on Tugler and Francis, who aren't as like you're not running offense to those guys. Like maybe Francis can score a couple times against Flag in the post-up game, but besides that, they're not going to keep going to that and keep running offense through him. So yeah, if they don't have an interior presence and Duke can stay connected on those shooters, I think it's going to be really tough for Houston to generate any form of offense.
Yeah. Now, do you think Houston can maybe get Flag into some foul trouble?
He's been prone to it.
That's kind of an avenue I've thought about for Houston here is like if they're able to have success on the defensive glass, like for as good as Cooper Flag is, like or as dominant as he's been, like if he ends up on Roberts on an offensive rebound situation, and Flag loves to try and block shots, right? Like Roberts is a 5th or 6th year guy, right? I think 6.
Yeah, 6, I think.
So, I mean, like, that's a grown man, right? Cooper Flag's 18 years old, as great as he's been, right? Like, Juwan Roberts maybe can use his experience, his frame to, like, bait Cooper Flag into a couple fouls. Maybe that's an avenue for Houston to get him off the floor. I don't know. That could be an area where they could be vulnerable. Duke, that is.
Yeah. He's shown he's a little bit undisciplined on defense at times. He will jump at pump fakes a lot, especially around the rim. He's always looking for a block shot. He's a great weak side rim protector. Obviously, he's great as the low man. defensively when Maluach is pulled away from the rim. So, but yeah, he's shown that he's a little bit undisciplined. And the thing is, like, even if he does pick up 2 fouls in the first half and maybe even a third, like Duke is really deep. So I'm not like worried about them getting like run out of the gym if Flag is in like super like worrisome foul trouble. So I don't, obviously it's a problem, but I think they'll be okay if he ends up sitting out like 6 or 7 minutes in the first half. I think they have enough shooting to get over the top of this Houston defense to like, at least keep some offense generating. But as you were saying that, I was kind of thinking like Flag against like a Roberts or Tugler off the bounce on the offensive end. Does that like create issues for this Houston defense? And is that going to create more minutes for Arsenault, or is like Houston's going to have to play a little bit smaller? Because we've seen them do that at times, and like maybe they just have to ramp up their pressure a little bit more and throw Arsenault at the 4 and like have Francis or Roberts or Tugler play the 5.
Yeah, they definitely could. I think that, if you watch today, like Kelvin Sampson, I think gets kind of infuriated with Arsenault on the offensive end sometimes because he really has no conscience. He just kind of chucks. Very tunnel vision type player that just goes dribble, 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 jack, right? And he called a timeout one time today, and I think he spent probably the first 20 seconds just ripping into Arsenault because he'd taken like 3 or 4 straight shots. So I think it's a matter of like if they can reel that in, then maybe that is an avenue that they take more often. They might have to. Obviously, then they're giving up something on the offensive or on the defensive glass, which is an area where, Duke, as it is, like Houston's 115th in defensive rebound rate. So if they're going to play smaller, for as good as they are on the offensive glass, they're not elite on the defensive glass. And Duke, of course, can have tons of success there. They're 52nd in offensive rebound rate. But if Houston is playing only one of those 2 bigs, where most of the time they're playing 2, they've become much worse, I think, than 115th in defensive rebound rate, which makes them much more vulnerable there. So I think ultimately, like, there's going to be something they're going to have to give up. And maybe it's like, even though Cooper Flag has shown tremendous growth from behind the arc, maybe it's just, they live with him taking 8 or 9 threes and like taking their chances. And Roberts, I think, is maybe a good enough athlete to, try and keep him in front with a little bit of space. Flag's going to get his though, right? Like that, he's too good.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen teams kind of dare him to shoot at times just because everyone else on the team is just so good from beyond the arc. Just like, especially Proctor and Knipple are just so good in the catch and shoot game, right. All the wings. Like, I've seen teams go under ball screens against Flag and just like, hey, please just knock down this 3. And, he does it a lot. I mean, he's a 37% 3-point shooter this year. Like, he's plenty good enough.
It's not really even a disrespect to him either. It's just like, no. They're just guarding him that way because it's the weakest part of his game, right? They don't want him getting downhill to either 1, score in the paint for himself, or 2, create something for others, which he has shown great ability to, especially when teams have to step up and help, and he can throw a lob, right? So I think like that's going to have to be what Houston's going to give up. I don't really think they have much of a choice because with those 2 bigs, it's not like they can, with the 2 bigs that Duke has, it's not like they can blitz the ball screen because he's just going to throw a lob, right? And those 2 bigs are both, capable above the rim guys that, Maluach especially much, much improved finishing around the rim as the season's gone on. He's really seemed to like get a feel now. And they look really, really good in that 2-man game.
Yeah, I mean, they're like, I think they make like, they throw the lob like 5 or 6 times a game to Maluach, and it's a dunk every single time. And I think they actually grade out. They're 100th percentile in pick and roll man play types. Like, that's tough because that's an area that Houston is going to filter a lot of their offense to. Obviously, a lot of that roll man stuff is from the lob. It's not from the short roll, which is why, like, I don't think Maluach is like a great like short roll like creator. Like, he's not going to pass out of that or anything like that. So that could be like an area to bother them. Yeah. Oh, absolutely. That's why I think Flag is so important as a roll man in this situation. And if Malik Brown's healthy, like, can he go out there and play 10 to 15 minutes? And because I trust him as more of a like a role man creator than I trust Maluach, obviously. So, but yeah, that's definitely something to monitor.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised to see them go like James or probably more James coming off ball screens with Flag as the screener, and then just throw Maluach in the dunker spot, right? And they hit Flag on the short
And then you have those
roll.
two wing shooters. Like, you have Proctor and Knipple on the wings there too. Like, it's just
Right.
there's a lot of
And
things you
then
have to cover.
it puts probably Tugler in jail, right? Because he's got to either step up to Flag. Obviously, they're going to make adjustments, like you pointed out. You know, Sampson's not an idiot. So, you know, but early on, you know, if they go to that, Tugler's either got to step up because he doesn't want Flag to get a 6-foot little bunny. But if he does, then Flag has shown the capability of throwing, you know, high level, accurate lobs. So it really puts them in jail.
Yeah, and I think there's going to come a time in this game where Houston is going to just switch everything. I think that they're going to switch all the off-ball screening action because Duke is really good off screens, and they love to filter to run a lot of their offense off of pin downs and just off screening actions in general. So I do think they're going to be switching a lot of those actions and kind of living with, you know, drawing unfortunate mismatches. Like, if Flag has a guy like Cryer on him, obviously it's a tough situation, especially down low in the post. But Duke doesn't really love attacking matchups in the post. They kind of like to do a little bit more in isolation. So maybe that's something Houston can do. Like, maybe in the second half, you know, if they're kind of getting torched on that end, I think there's going to come a time where they're switching everything and at least trying to cut off some of these shooters.
Yeah, no, I agree. Like, Duke does run that action, kind of almost like that back screen sort of flex action for Flag, that where they start him on like the left elbow and he gets that screen that gets him to the right block. They run that a bunch against teams that switch that off ball stuff, and he ends up with, like, because they set that screen from the corner, I think, with like a guard, and then he ends up, you know, just putting some guard in the rim. So you know, that's something to watch out for too if Houston does start switching all that stuff.
Right. Yeah, I mean, this Duke offense has come such a long way too. You know, it used to just be, you know, get the ball to Flag and let him play in isolation late in games, but now they just have so many other weapons that have grown throughout the year. Like, obviously, like when Foster was in the starting lineup, he wasn't
he's
shooting well, and
he's even grown.
He's been
like
better.
He's looked good. So yeah, I think that ultimately, like, Duke just has too much here, too many weapons on the offensive end. They're the best team in the country right now, which is why we think Duke's going to get it done. You know, Duke's going to move on here in the Final Four, move on to the national championship next Monday night to face the winner of Florida and Auburn.